So good morning everyone. My name is Rebecca Prince-Ruiz and I'm the founder of Plastic Free July, and I'm here in the beautiful cozy kitchen of my dear friend and inspirational teacher Jude Blereau, and we are on Wajak Noongar country, and we'd like to pay our respects to the traditional owners of this land and their elders past, present and emerging, and their ongoing care for country.
Oh, and this beautiful land, which, you know, in the Swan Valley is just such a really sacred place. Beautiful land.
And very chilly this morning.
Very chilly. I'm not taking my jumper off anytime soon.
I've got my jacket on. So we're coming to you this morning from Perth in Western Australia, and it's my really great pleasure to be here with you, Jude. I can't remember.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for getting to meet everybody, and hello. No, I love it. I love what you're doing.
Yeah.
She's very inspirational too. Seriously.
So I can't remember how long ago it was I first did a cooking class with you, Jude, but this was
20 years probably?
Oh, I don't think it's quite that
15
long.
years?
Yeah, it was
probably.
quite a while.
Yeah.
My kids were quite little, and this was one of your Wholefood.
That's my first baby.
Was your first cookbook, and I think when I went on this, I was saying this to you earlier, Jude, when I first started trying to reduce my plastic packaging, and I started Plastic Free July back in 2011, I just switched from plastic to tin. Everything came in tins or in glass, and I suddenly realized, like, I don't want it. Whilst of course my goal was to reduce plastic packaging, and that was my aim. It's a challenge to recycle. It's a real problem if it ends up in our environment. But I realized I was just substituting. And as I went into this journey, I realized that buying food in plastic packaging meant buying food that was heavily processed, preserved, and had a lot of food miles. So I guess it led me to this journey of, well, I can't buy so much from a supermarket. My kids are getting a bit hungry. I'm going to have to learn some new skills to where I'm going to buy my food. I started going to the farmer's market, and really fortunate here to have bulk food stores. But then it was like, how do I cook it? And I've learnt so much over the years through your book. One of my favourite recipes, which after many years now, the very nice pancakes, where I soak my wholemeal flour overnight, and collect mulberries from a friend's tree each year and freeze those, and then add pears to ours. And that was one of the first things I started doing, and then it was a breakfast I'd make for my kids each week, but then I'd make double and I'd put it in their lunches. And that was it was just starting to make easy switches like that, and that could be the substitute from the packaged muesli bar or whatever it was that was going into their lunches before. And I'm so far from perfect in terms of I'm not plastic free, but
that's a really good thing that you're far from perfect. No one's perfect.
No, but it's been learning those new skills step by step. So I was really keen to share some of your generous knowledge and wisdom and perspective on taking things back to the very basics. So I'm delighted to be here with you this morning, Jude.
It's great. We love chatting. I think the thing is, oh God, there's so many things that just want to be said straight away, but it's like, I want to preface this by I've been doing this for about 30 years. And why I want to preface it like that is because basically everything that you're talking about is a part of a whole food journey. A whole food journey, in a sense, is how we answer the question, what makes the food that we eat wholesome and delicious and digestible and nourishing and ethical and sustainable? So all those things, it's how we grow it, how we look after the soil, the plastic that we use, the storage that things might be in, because storage consume a massive amount of energy and plastic for sure. But why I wanted to preface it with it for the 30 years thing is because what's happened And what probably a lot of you are seeing and is overwhelming and confusing to you is that in the last 8 years, or 5 years particularly, the whole food movement has become staggeringly fractionalized. It really has. And you're hearing things like, well, you know, you've got to go paleo, or you've got to go raw, or you got to be, oh, God knows, there are lots of different things. Or you have to be having chia seeds, or you have to be having a green smoothie, or these things. That's not necessarily what a whole food path is about. A whole food path is really about returning to how humans have lived ever since the beginning of time, really, basically, how we look after the soil that grows our food, because ultimately it's all about the soil, how we then prepare that food, how we eat that food, and of course then that incorporates all the things around it, like how we store it.
And I think the other thing, Jude, and this has been on my mind a lot lately, as I've switched to trying to eat more fresh local produce.
Yeah.
I think it's also about, it's not just about the food, but it's about the people in those systems as well, and caring for them.
It's totally about it, and more than just caring for them. When we buy, and locality, seasonality, they're all core whole food principles. Cooking from scratch is a core whole food principle. And the thing is, we are not going to change the structure of society that we have, with people mostly living in cities. That's not going to change, no matter how much we might ideally want that to happen. That structure is there. So we actually depend on these people that might not live in the city and that grow our food and come to the city at farmers markets to sell it to us. It's like this web of life, you know, we're codependent. Yes, I'm a big fan of growing as much food as you can, and I think one of the great things in the COVID time is that we've seen is that people have just been flocking to buying seeds and wanting to learn how to grow food again. But it's we're all in it together, and that's not this COVID thing. It's like, if we are going to be living in cities and the societal expectation is that we're working long hours, which I personally disagree with, that's not sustainable for humans, but nonetheless, that's what's happening. We need someone to grow us good food. Because if we don't have good nutrient-dense food that many people grow for us when they're farming organically or biodynamically, or they're farming in that way and they're not certified, or that's now got a new name like regenerative agriculture, that's the kind of food that matches our body and allows us to flourish and to be nourished and to fight off bugs and to not get too tired and to cope with stresses and have a good brain so we could learn or grow good bones, you know. So we need those guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Jude, I'm really looking forward to what you're going to teach us this morning. I'm going to hand over to you and your beautiful kitchen.
Chat about what we're going to do this morning?
Okay, that sounds great.
I think that might be really nice. And what we're going to do this morning is I'm going to show you how to cook legumes, basically, and beans, but pretty much it's the same thing with lentils. And I might just do this here while we're here together, because you can give me a bit of a hand. I'll just put that away for a second. But basically, let's get this over here. All right, so you can get me out a couple of those beans and we'll put them here in front of us on the table. And the thing about legumes and why I wanted to show you how to cook them today is because they're dead easy to do. They will massively reduce your food costs, and you're not going to be buying them in plastic lined cans. But the other thing about legumes that is critically important is that legumes, when a bean grows and it's in its lovely little shell, and these are shelling beans, so you grow shelling beans for the bean inside, And when they're very young, like you might have had the opportunity, these are dried Borlotti beans, but you might from time to time have seen cranberry beans in the shop, or Borlotti beans when they're fresh off the bush. And what you'll see is that they're really quite a lot larger, they're more pink and purpley in colour, and they are moist. And that moisture is that the sugars or the carbohydrate, you've got to say when you're saying carbohydrate, you're saying sugar, it's the same thing. And those sugar chains are in really simple forms and they're easy for your tummy to digest. But as it dries and they get darker in colour and those sugar chains become longer, that you can't store, nature doesn't store her sugars in very short chains. When they go into storage, she starts putting them into very long sugar chains, very difficult for human tummies to digest. Yeah, like grains, same thing, really difficult. And that's why we soak them. And I'm going to go on to that in a little bit in a minute. And that's why we soak them to activate them into life. And one of the things in cans is cans don't do that.
They don't soak them.
They don't soak them. Even if they're organic, you've got to remember that organic doesn't mean how something is made, it's how it's grown.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how it's grown. So most canned beans, Eden beans in the United States, which you can get on the East Coast, they soak them and they cook them with kombu, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, and they put them in a BPA can. But they're going to cost. Yeah? So those organic beans that you're buying are just, you know, they whack them, they might soak them for a little bit, but they rely on the pressure in the can, because in the higher pressure that they do the canned beans with, to soften them.
Okay.
Not digestible. Yeah? So what I've got here, I want to show you another, just a little thing before we get onto this and get them cooking, is the beans that you see here. I live in Perth, Western Australia, and up north in the Ord River is a very large growing area. Okay, they're not organic, but what they are is that they're under a year old and they're really fresh. And
so where did you, are these ones?
They're the Ord River
store?
Yeah, they're from the Ord River, Borlotti, from the Ord River. These are from what you might buy as Mackenzie's. Nothing wrong with the Mackenzie brand, but you just buy them in the supermarket. And straight up you can see that they're a little bit smaller, yeah, straight away. So they're going to be older, and actually, interestingly, they're from the USA. So that means they're going to be much older, much more difficult to digest. These cook up. So the point that I want to say to you is that the longer your bean has been out of the pod and is drying, the longer they'll take to cook. And in general, most of the beans that you buy in Australia does not grow a lot of beans. Yeah, lots of lentils, chickpeas, navy beans, a couple of other, not very many beans, and most of them are imported and they are old. And old beans will take a long time to cook. These should take about 25, 30 minutes to cook. These will probably take an hour and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jude, like, we're very lucky here in Perth. We have a lot of bulk food
We
stores,
do.
but that's certainly not the case everywhere. And so I guess one of the things I like about learning this is that, you know, rather than, like, if you don't have access to the bulk food store, rather than buying tins, you're still going to dramatically reduce your packaging.
Massive.
And get a much better product if you are buying that one plastic packet and making a large amount.
You are. Online has some great, there are great bulk food stores online as well, though. They're all very conscious, or a lot of them, about their packaging. They pack it into brown paper bags and things. It's really important when it comes to cooking legumes, and they're ridiculously cheap. Even when they're packed, they're still cheap, but when you buy them in bulk, they're even cheaper. But I think the point that I want to get across to you is that the older your bean is, the longer they're going to take to cook. And that if you live in the United States, you are lucky, because you've got very fresh dried beans over there. And it's this, people say, oh, you know, how long do they take to cook? And you'll see in most recipe books 1.5 hours, or in some recipe books 20 to 30 minutes. Well, they're generally going to be American because those beans are really fresh. They're like this. They're dried, but they haven't been dried for that long. In Australia, if you live in Australia, what you'll find is that my advice to you is not to use organic beans, which is a little bit unusual. But as I mentioned, there are not a lot of beans grown in Australia. Chickpeas, yes, and Ord River does chickpeas as well, but chickpeas are fine. But in Australia, most beans, like black, which we're going to use in a minute, because I love them, like black or pinto or kidney especially, or Great Northern or cannellini, they're all imported. And if you are importing organic beans into Australia, what they do, because they can't fumigate them, because you can't fumigate, everything that comes into Australia is fumigated, poisons, all sorts of stuff, toxins. You can't use those when it's certified organic, so what they do is they heat treat them, and so that means they're subjected to searing kind of heat, and that kills everything that's on them. But what it does, it also kind of, it impacts them cooking basically, and they don't cook. So I just want to say that because there will be people here on this call that are saying, I've been cooking my beans, they never cook. I can't cook beans, I give up, it's useless. You've probably got organic beans that have been brought into Australia. So I just wanted to do that, but non-organic beans are fine. Yes, you've got a bit of fumigation going on, which is not great, but we're going to soak them and cook them. But that's my feeling. There are a lot of good beans in Australia. There are still some good ones that are growing. Mount Zero in Victoria are really good. They've got a few, but I tend to stick to limited beans that I know are grown in the country that I live. But I do use black beans because I love them so much. All right. So what we're going to do next, so this is a black bean or a black turtle bean, and we're going to cook these two beans today. And this is the way we cook all legumes. First of all, we soak them, and we soak them to activate them into life. So what nature does is she packs all her seeds, including sunflower seeds or nuts or grains, because they're her seeds. She's got to continue on. So number one, she stores her her sugars into longer chains that are difficult for you to digest. She puts lots of enzymes in those seeds so they don't sprout until conditions are right. Pointless for them to sprout when there's no water, or else they'll die and she won't survive. So she packs them with enzymes to stop that sprouting, again making it difficult for you to digest. And then she puts a whole lot of what you call anti-nutrients into it as well, so that if animals eat them, they're going to poo them out, and the animals haven't been able to absorb any of the nourishment for them, and they might still be viable. And some of those anti-nutrients, you might have heard, there's phytic acid, there's oxalic acid, there's tannins. Legumes or lentils especially have a lot of tannins on them. Now, here's another, and you know what? If this is going too deep for you, I like to go deep, I really do. I'm a bit of a deep diver. But if what I'm going to say next is just too much for you, just soak them. Don't stress about it at all, please.
So, Jude, if you did nothing else,
soak them,
you'd be better off.
Oh, miles better off. Yeah. Miles better off. Miles.
Jude, I'm going to go jump behind the camera so I can see if people are asking questions.
Great. Okay, and I'll get into this. So now I'm going to... let's just swap that over. So when we soak, primarily what we're doing is activating that seed into life. And if I give it a little shake here, there's not much going on because it's pretty freezing in the kitchen at the moment, and in the you might see it might have seen just a little bubble going up. Cover them well with water, not just a little bit of water, well. Doesn't matter if you're using a chickpea, a red kidney bean, a lentil, doesn't matter. Soak them. Secondly, what you want to do is, if you can, keep it warm. Now, the kitchen's cold, and so there was nothing much I could do about that. But in summer, leave them out at room temperature, even if it's incredibly hot. Keep it warm somewhere if you can. And what you're doing then is activating lacto-fermentation. Okay, and it's the lacto-fermentation that is really going to work against those anti-nutrients. So the soaking process in the water and some warmth will let the seed know, hello little seed, it's time for you to come to life, and those enzymes start breaking down and making those sugar chains a little bit shorter so they're easier for you to access. It also leaches some of those longer sugar chains called oligosaccharides out into the soaking water. But if you can keep it a little bit warm, what you're going to do is activate lacto-fermentation, and when there's been good lacto-fermentation and you shake the jar or the bowl, it'll be bubble, bubble, bubble coming up, which is the carbon dioxide, which is part of the process of lacto-fermentation. Now, one of the things that we do to help that lacto-fermentation or help that breaking down of those anti-nutrients in legumes, not grains, is that we add either an acid, and I've got a bit of lemon juice in here. Lemon, got to be lemon. But in this one, you can see that I don't. I've actually got a little bit of Kombu Sea Vegetables. And basically, there are different families of legumes. So this little black turtle bean or chickpeas or lentils, they're all part of a simpler family of beans. They're much easier to digest. But when you get into Borlotti beans, red kidney beans, cannellini beans, great northern beans, pinto beans, you're in a different family, and that family is Pulsa vulgaris or common bean, and they're much more difficult to digest, and they like an alkali. So I noticed people in some of your posts, Rebecca, with your chickpea post, were saying, oh, I put a bit of bicarb soda in. Bicarb soda is an alkali. So that's not a bad thing to do with this family of beans, is to pop, but acid is better for your chickpeas, yeah? Now, the bit that I was going to say to you about disregard this if that's getting too far for you, just soak them, keep them warm, okay? Just do that. Don't worry about the lemon or the kombu or the bicarb soda. Just keep them warm and let lacto-fermentation do its role. But the groovy thing about Kombu Sea Vegetable is that where in Japan it's always used to cook legumes, particularly these heavy hitter family legumes, is that it's got its own little special enzyme in it. Oh, Constance has decided to join us in the kitchen. Oh, just see how she goes. That's my cat. It's got its own little special enzyme in here that helps break down the bean as well. So there you are. That's just this amazing traditional nourishing wisdoms. Yeah, that's what I'm throwing in there for you. So kombu, worth it to cook your heavy hitting beans with. And it's full of good minerals as well. All right, so we've got those soaked. I soaked them. You want to soak beans for a good amount of time, at least 24 hours. Yeah, 12 to 24 hours, but the longer the better. Yeah. All right, so let's get those out of the way. And next, we're just going to get these on cooking. But yeah, when it's a little bit warmer, what you will see is it'll be a little bit fizzy, and that's a good thing. Now, is that making sense for everyone, Rebecca?
Yeah, we just had one question, Jude. I think before when I went to the questions, it froze the screen for a minute. Okay. But someone said, where is the best place to buy beans in Perth?
I love bulk foods. They're great.
And another one, Jude, that's the cat bumping the tripod there, is would you ever use whey?
Yes, absolutely. So any acid, you can use any acid when it comes to acid. You can use vinegar, you can use lemon, you could use yogurt, which has got lactic acid in it, you could use whey, which is lactic acid, you could use kombucha, you could use kefir, you could use water kefir. They're all acids, yeah? I had lemon.
Just one more question. Where do you buy the sea vegetable?
So, kombu, actually let me grab it. This is something that I would recommend that you get, okay? It'll make a big difference to your legumes. So, this is Kombu Sea Veg.
Can you use other sea vegetables? Like I can buy wakame.
I know, I'm just going to go into that.
Great.
Just going to go into that. So, this is Kombu Sea Vegetable. Now, kombu, like all sea vegetables, are concentrated sources of minerals. There's proteins, there's carbohydrates, there's lovely fatty acids in there as well. And each sea veggie is rich in a certain thing, and in kombu it's iodine, okay, which is staggeringly there's not a lot of it in Australia and New Zealand. But to cut a long story short, about 6 years ago, the TGA banned kombu in Australia, and they weren't allowed to import it anymore because it's too high in iodine. And it was kind of a resulting case of people drinking a lot of soy milk, which is traditionally formulated with kombu, so it was banned. Which is nuts, but that's another whole discussion. This is not a bad thing, and that's another whole big story of all the bits and pieces in it. But like anything, this is a concentrated food, and in Japan, in its natural country, they eat sea vegetables consistently, but in small amounts, because they're incredibly strong, but incredibly nourishing real foods. So I really like to stock. I couldn't imagine a kitchen without kombu, particularly a whole food kitchen. It's magic for beans. So what I do is I buy it and import it myself. So this is the Eden brand if you're in the United States, or even many of the European countries. Eden is all around the world. You'll be able to buy it. In Australia, I have to buy it through iHerb online, and iHerb is an overseas company, and bring it in. But I'm pretty sure that New Zealand and Tasmania are doing kombu as well. So if you like to have a little bit of a Google, kombu, Australia, New Zealand, you'll find there are some local brands as well. And you only need a tiny bit, but worth it, really worth it. It's a very traditional thing to use with beans, particularly this heavy-hitting family. But let's just sum that up. Don't stress about this acid alkaline thing. What I'd like you really, it's a good thing to do, don't get me wrong, but more importantly, soak your legumes. Keep them warm if you can. Soak them for a good length of time, at least 12 hours, but preferably 24, even 36, yeah? And if after all that, you've done all that soaking and you find that they haven't cooked in like 20 hours, you've probably got an organic one that's been heat treated. All right, so soaking, strain those babies off. And I'm just over at the sink, so don't mind me. Oh, you're seeing my grotty sink. So don't mind me. So strain it off. Get your pot. And I'm going to make sure I do my beans in a stainless steel pot, because otherwise these black beans stain, and I soak them in stainless steel or glass because they're going to stain if you use a good white bowl. Rinse them, that's really important, because part of the soaking process is you're leaching oligosaccharides, those long sugar chains, into the water. Soak them, rinse them into a pot, and add water. Get rid of the acid, add water, cook them till they're done. That's it. You can add water, or you can add stock. You can add flavourings if you like. But let's just say I'm doing a can of beans, okay? And I call them my can of beans. I'm going to add...
I've got a question here.
Yep.
If you're unable to source kombu, is there any other alkaline you could use?
Yes, bicarb soda, which is a great home alkali. Yeah? Not too much, just a pinch. Now, what I'm soaking here and what I have soaked and the recipe I work on is a half a cup. A half a cup of raw beans will make 1 1/4, 1 1/2 of cooked beans. But just do whatever you like. But what I do usually, but I'm sticking to a basic rule today, is what I usually do is make heaps and then freeze the rest. So I'm going to put those on to cook. No salt. Don't add salt. Add salt later on in the cooking process. Salt is going to hinder that cooking process, okay? No salt. So they're going on to cook. And I'm going to just bring that over here. Or let's put the Borlotti on next. And you can boil them hard, boil them slow, it doesn't matter. But just remember, if you boil them hard, what's going to happen is that it'll evaporate off and you'll have to replace the water. Okay, Borlottis, and look how much they've plumped up. Actually, both of them are plumped up beautifully. And this, I'm going to cook in just my little le creuset. And I'm going to put the kombu in with it. Because it's it's going to really help the beans when they cook. It's going to help soften those beans again and make them more digestible. And if I wanted to, I could have cooked up a little bit of onion in olive oil and herbs or garlic or bay leaf and sage or basil in summer, and then put the beans in and cook them like that, and you add flavour to the beans as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add stock to these. And the stock I've made is a chicken stock, but you could add a veggie stock, but when you add a bone stock to your beans, you're also going to make them more digestible, much easier for you to digest as well. So
I've just got another question. Yep. Have you put in the same piece of kombu?
Yes, that I soaked.
Used to soak?
Yep, I did. Yep. I'll just put that there. Okay, so let's just get you. And the stock that I've made is really what I call kind of cupboard love stock. I don't know if you can see it, but it's like, that's parsley from the garden. There's leek that was the tops of the leek that I use all of my leek. I don't just use the white in cooking, but when it started getting to the grungy top bit, I keep it for my stock. It's got the carrots, some carrots that were aging a little bit. I had a little bit of sweet potato that was aging. Celery that was getting a little bit older, I've got in here. Bay from the garden, thyme from the garden, and I try and keep chicken feet in the freezer. This was a bit of a cupboard love stock, but what you've got here that I think is worth showing you is this is an organic chicken, but I had cut it because I usually buy whole chickens and then cut them into portions and freeze them. It's much cheaper, but this is where the backbone has been cut out with the neck intact, and it's a great thing for stock, and I usually have a few of them in my freezer, so I've got that in there.
So with Jude, with the vegetables that you're using with the stock,
yep,
you're using lots of leftover pieces. Do you always just use them fresh, or?
I do. I just keep them in my fridge. I must admit, I have stock fairly regularly on the stove because it's just, I think if you're looking for a superfood, that's it. But let's say once every 2 weeks I might do stock, and I keep most of my things in the fridge either in swag bags or in tea towels that are damp, and you'll be surprised at how long things last. They last for ages. So, and if I haven't got to them in that time, I can put them in the freezer, but honestly, I prefer not to freeze them. I prefer to just whack them on the stove. They'll easily last 2-3 weeks in the fridge. And wrapped in a damp tea towel really extends their life. And then I'll just whack a stock on, because even if it's just veggies, and the other thing that's a good little stock is water that you've cooked your veggies in or steamed your veggies in. People used to use that pot liquor all the time. That used to be the name for it, pot liquor. So stock, kombu, Borlotti beans on, okay? So that is as easy as it is. And here are my black beans cooked, and I cooked these in stock, that same stock, and you can see there was not too much sieving going on. There's a little bit of celery that ended up in it. Tell you what I really like to use for stock with the celery is the outside leaves that are a lot older. They're really great. Now, one of the things I want to say to you is how long do you cook a bean for? You cook a bean until it's ready. And it's ready, excuse me, I'm just trying to get a few nice little selection for you. It's ready when you can squeeze the bean, just gently. I'll just use even my least, and its starchy middle comes out, or put it between your fingers and just press it. Yeah, that's when it's ready. If it's still pebbly and it's got really rocky pebbly bits in it, it's not only not cooked, it's not digestible. And I can tell you, I'm over going to places or cafes or things like that, and you have legumes that are like pebbly inside. That's not digestible, yeah, and you will have issues with them. And I can assure you it won't be any gluten, though there's no gluten in here. It's generally, particularly in grains, that they're not cooked appropriately. The other thing that's really important to notice here, is that the beans aren't all perfect and gorgeous. Now, partly that's my fault, because I left them on the stove, I had them on the boil, and I didn't have enough liquid that had boiled off this morning. So they kind of stuck to the bottom a bit, so I had to kind of move them off. So that's partly my fault that you've got little halves like this going on, yeah? Like that little bit there. That's my fault. But invariably what you will find is your beans are not going to end up all perfect and cooked, yeah, and in a beautiful shape. Some of them will have blown open. That's the nature of it. That's digestible, okay? But keep an eye on them. These took about 1.5 hours to cook, which is fairly typical. Those local and very young dried Borlotti beans will probably take 20 to 25 minutes. Just keep your eye on it. That's the golden rule when doing legumes. Keep your eye on it. Check them from time to time, and when they're lovely and soft and creamy with gentle pressure, they're ready. Now, storing, okay? I freeze all my beans. I like to think of my freezer as my little shop. So I haven't got an empty jar at the moment, sadly, but I keep masses of these jars. This is the Ball and Mason. This has got basmati, brown basmati in it at the moment, but I don't have a free one. They're all kind of full with stuff at the moment. If you open up the fridge, you'll see hundreds of these with things in them. But I tend to freeze in this. Sometimes I do freeze in plastic, okay? And I have to say, and Rebecca and I were talking about this earlier, is if plastic comes my way, or I've got plastic that I bought years ago when in chef training, when I had to have all plastic in the kitchen because glass breaks, I keep it and I use it and I use it and I use it and I use it. Yeah, so I do that either in that, but these ones are brilliant as well. This is a round Pyrex, but that Pyrex with the lid, they're brilliant as well. But I often use these, and I'll put it in here, and I freeze in their cooking liquid. Because number one, that cooking liquid has flavour. It's delicious, especially when you've cooked it in a stock. And number two, it keeps them dry, it keeps them moist, and you get a much moister end result. And you can strain off the liquid if you don't need it. But it's really important, particularly when you're freezing in glass, to leave headspace. You want to leave a good amount of headspace. Pack your beans in, pour the liquid over them, preferably so it's over the top of them, and then freeze them. So that means that that liquid is going to expand. The liquid inside the bean will expand, and that's why you need that headspace. And I just want to say to you, I think that one of the most delicious things I've ever had, that is, I've had lots of delicious things, but a memory in a class I did in Geraldton probably about 4 years ago, is I'd soak some Lima beans and cook them, and I just had that, but they took ages to cook, so they were definitely, and they were organics and they were imported, but they actually did end up cooking, but they took about 10 hours, and I had to keep topping them up, and I had chicken stock, so I kept topping them up with chicken stock. They were insane because the chicken stock had reduced, and I'd add more, and oh my God, they were so divine. Any questions about freezing?
I'm just going to check the questions now, Jude, because the screen seems to freeze when I...
It's 9:42.
Just a question about pressure cookers and cooking beans in those.
Yep, you can use pressure cookers to cook beans. I was going to do you some refried beans. I might get them happening. I'll see what we can get done. You can absolutely use a pressure cooker to cook beans, but that does not mean that you don't soak and do everything that I just discussed with you. Bear in mind as well, that food is about energetics as well. And energetically right now, we're in winter, and when you pressure cook, you've got pressure going down. It's a very yang way, macrobiotically speaking, and it will make your food more concentrated and will make it more yang. So it's a great way of cooking legumes at this time of the year in winter, because yang is warming energy. If you're in the northern hemisphere, yes, if it's a matter of a pressure cooker or not, go for it. But you'd probably be better energetically in hot climates cooking beans on top of the stove where they're not so yang. They're more cooling than warming. That's just energetically speaking. Rebecca,
I've got a couple of questions, Jude, but I think you've answered most of them. One was about Lima beans splitting open while they're cooking. Can you stop that? But you've already said that.
You're not going to stop it.
That's not a problem.
It's like, this is nature. Yeah, this is what nature does. And we have become a perfect world where everything that you see is highly curated, even on most Instagram feeds or Facebook or magazines or books. And that's not how real food looks. And it's not the kind of food that is going to nourish you. Lima beans that haven't split open are probably not going to be digestible.
And the other question was around, can you use the water the beans were soaked in?
No,
but you said
no. You must discard it and you must rinse. When you're soaking a grain, you can use that soaking water to cook, be a bit acidic, but you can. But in legumes, no, you've got to discard it, okay? Now, while I'm answering questions, I'm very quickly, I think I can just throw this together fairly quickly and do just a little refried bean, which with these black beans, which means that if I had, and you can throw me questions as well.
Okay, so one person, a couple of people actually asked, is it okay to use a Thermomix to cook beans?
Yes, yes, but remember, so what I've got in here, and I'll go through this a little bit later, I've just got some olive oil, but guys, if I had bacon fat, beautiful, which I have in the fridge, but I don't have time to do. And I used all the bacon fat I'd collected the other day. It was organic, nitrate-free, maple syrup cured bacon, divine. I'd be using it here. But I've got a good glug of olive oil. I've got onion, I've got garlic. I'm just going to get some lovely colouring going on those. And while that's happening, we'll do questions. The thing about Thermomix is, yes, you can absolutely use a Thermomix to do it, but I'm pretty sure that they don't do stainless steel baskets anymore, which is where you cook them in.
Right, okay. And somebody asked if you could repeat the brand of beans where they soak them before they...
Eden. So Eden is an American company. They export all over the world. Eden products are exceptional. In Australia, the sister company to Eden is Spiral, and I'm a huge Spiral fan. They're such a company with so much integrity. So yeah, Eden for kombu, but I'm pretty sure that Tasmania and New Zealand are doing kombu as well.
So one other question, is there a difference between beans and legumes?
No, legumes is the name of the family, the overriding family, and it might be Fabaceae, I think, as well. I can't remember, but no, that's the name. Legumes. It covers a whole. It covers your Pulsa vulgaris, which is like, oh, and I wanted to show you the Christmas Lima beans, guys. These grow like nothing. Oh my God. And you can buy Christmas Lima bean seeds. They're big, they're fat, they're meaty, and they grow like nothing. It's too cold now in the southern hemisphere in most places to grow. But as soon as it gets hot, summer's the time for growing beans. They just are so insanely productive, the Christmas Lima bean bush, and divine, really big, fat and meaty. But yes, the legume family is like the Pulsa vulgaris, which is your kidney, your Borlotti, your pinto, your cannellini, your Great Northern, all those. Then you've got the chickpea family. Then you've got a dukey bean family, black turtle bean family, lentil family, and also another term that all of those are called is dal. Yeah? Indians call beans dal. Yeah? All right, question away.
So someone asked if you could just repeat the list of beans, and we can post this on our socials as well, Jude. List of beans that you soak with acid. Okay, and also they are everything. There's a lot of great detail about that in Wholefood from the ground up. And in any of my online classes, we go into a lot of this in detail too, but you'll find a lot of information in here. But Pulsa vulgaris, the ones that require an alkali, are pinto, Borlotti, kidney, Lima, cannellini, Great Northern. Probably a few others as well, because you've got to remember there are lots of different beans, and particularly more in the northern hemisphere than in the southern hemisphere. As I said, the soy, navy, and then the chickpea family is its own family. Chechi, CICI. The dukey beans are their own family. Black turtle beans are their own family. Lentils are their own family. And the interesting thing is, you know, when you see a lot of recipes with chickpea flour in them, so you've got to be thinking to yourself, that's a legume flour. It hasn't been soaked, hasn't been cooked. How the heck am I going to digest that? Well, it's because that chickpea family is a very different family. It doesn't have that massive oligosaccharides that these other ones does. Having said that, if you've got a dodgy tummy, you're going to find chickpea flour very difficult to digest, really difficult to digest. But it's why chickpea flour kind of can get over the mark for some people, but you never make a flour out of Borlotti or kidney or any of those others. So
what I'm going to do with this, and we might get it done just in time, is I've got a good slug of extra virgin olive oil, onion and garlic, 2 cloves of garlic, a small brown onion, and I'm going to just, or Rebecca, can you whiz into the fridge there? And on the bottom shelf on the right, there's going to be a plastic container with a red spot tea towel in it. Can you see it? So I'm going to show you, I'm going to put some coriander stem into this. And I want to show you how I store my coriander and how I store pretty much all my herbs, or lettuce. So I get a veggie box from Jane and Peter, who grow about 20 minutes down the road from me. They're not certified, they grow amazingly. And this comes in the veggie box I get, and then I wash it and I put it in a damp tea towel. And so this is 2 weeks old now.
Wow.
Yeah,
They were some of our first plastic-free July participants.
They're amazing. And this is a very, very old plastic container. From probably Earth Market days, which is 2000. So there you go. And I've got so much of it. And this has all been washed before I put it away. So there's a few dodgy bits in there.
Jude, can I ask you a question? Does your tea towel go mouldy?
No. But it will if I keep it in there for ages.
Yeah.
Yeah? Because there's dampness. But usually, so this is 2 weeks old now, and you can see you're getting a few grotty bits.
It's so fresh.
But it's brilliant. I used to do this when I was working commercially too. And I do that for lettuce. It lasts really well that way. So I'm just going to chuck all of this in. So in the refried bean recipe, it's like brown the onion, or give it a little bit of colour. And when it's got a little bit of colour, add some capsicum. Capsicums aren't in season now, so I'm going to leave that. And some charred jalapeno. Jalapenos are out of season, I don't have them now, but basically all I'm going to do is add a little bit of flavour and mash these cooked black beans down. I'm going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar to it, and because I don't have a charred jalapeno with its lovely smoky flavour, I'm going to add a little bit of smoked paprika. All right, and I'm going to cook it down, cook it down, and then I'm going to serve it. I don't think I'm going to get it finished in time to show you, but I'll show you what I'm going to serve it with. And Rebecca, can you, because I think it's a really good thing to talk about, can you grab one of the salsas, the small salsas from the preserve cupboard? All right, so both of my beans here are coming to the boil. The black beans at the boil, the Borlotti beans are at the boil. I'm just going to turn them both down. And what I can do when they're at the boil is just put a lid on a jar like that, so I don't lose all the steam. Okay, I do like a boil with my beans. You can bake your beans in the oven too. If you want beans that have got less disturbance of like losing their skin, breaking into pieces, bake them in the oven. Okay, it'll take a bit longer, but that's easy peasy. Oh, tomato. If you're doing baked beans or you're doing minestrone or something like that, don't add tomato, which is really acidic, until your beans are just about partly cooked. Okay, let them cook first, and your baked beans then start adding your tomato. Okay, and salt them towards the end. So this one's at the boil too, and a nice steady boil. I'm just going to put that on a bit of an angle so I don't lose all the liquid. So it's not a rolling crazy boil. Can you grab one of the smaller ones? All right, so that's looking pretty good. Probably did it a bit too fast, but we've kind of, I'm going for time today, but that's all right. And then I'm going to, yeah, perfect, and have a look at that in a tick. I'm not going to put all the, I'll bring this over and show you what I'm doing in a sec. Oh, I actually could do that over here where you could see it. All right, so. And remember that the liquid that I've done here is chicken stock. Well, I actually added a bit of water to it as well because it had run out of liquid. And what that means is that that chicken stock's going to concentrate down too, and it's going to make it insanely delicious. But that's enough water. And basically, I'm just going to get those on. I'm going to put a bit of smokiness. The capsicum in it looks lovely, or charred jalapeno chili looks lovely in it as well with the colour. But basically I'm just going to let them cook down, absorb the flavours. Oh, you know what I'm going to put in? A bit of ground cumin. Okay, but I'm just going to leave that. But a bit of ground cumin will be divine in there as well. So we'll just pretend it's got a bit of ground cumin added to the onion. On the stove, I'll go and mash it down and let those flavours all come together. And how we're going to serve that is we made some tortillas earlier, or you could just use, look, that's a lovely little corn tortilla, so gluten-free, but and that recipe's in that book. But you know what? You could just do whatever you like. I do this sometimes just with rice, yeah. And we'll just see how we go for time and questions. But what I wanted to show you and wanted to just talk to you briefly about is that I know that what we're doing here is it's just talking about cooking your legumes yourself. You can do it. It will reduce your food costs, and it's going to get you away from plastic lined cans. And there's such delicious and nourishing foods. But when you're ready and further down the path, and when you feel ready to, consider preserving, okay? Because it is one of the most amazing ways that you can move away from plastic, and a brilliant way to reduce your food costs. So this is a salsa that I made in summer, and it's got lots of lime juice in it, and you never do bottling unless you know the rules. So I just want to throw that to you as well. But this is a cherry, tomato, corn, lime salsa, and it's got chili in it as well. So I'm going to use that now in the middle of winter to bring a little bit of summer into the kitchen. And I'm going to have one of those little tortillas. This refried beans, I'm going to cook it right down and mash it up a little bit. And we're going to put a bit of that on top of our corn tortilla. I'm going to mash an avocado. Now this avocado, look, it's a little bit soft on the bottom. It really desperately needs using, but I couldn't get to it. So probably as it started to be, I realised it was ripe, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get to that. I whacked it in the fridge. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, I'm pretty much prepared to say it's going to be perfect inside. Okay, it's coloured a little bit, so there's a little bit of dodginess down the bottom, but not a lot. It's going to be fine. But put it in the fridge. It's usable. Yeah. And I also wanted to show you, because it was here and I think it's well worth looking at, that's the Demeter Biodynamic label. And Biodynamic is, oh my God, I love Biodynamic. Biodynamic is when you're working with all the organics, all organic principle, but you're harvesting the forces of the cosmos as well. It's like Rudolf Steiner's agricultural system. It's such a difference in those food. And that Demeter label, that's the real true hardcore Biodynamic. I just thought I'd show you that. Yes?
We're coming to the end, Jude. We've just got a couple of more minutes.
Sure, question away.
Question away. I'll just check the questions. But there is anything, any other big picture?
I think the thing that I'd like to say to each and every one of you that are here today, and thank you for coming into my kitchen, is that, guys, Cooking is a learnt skill, and it will take you time, even learning where to source your bulk legumes from, or to feel confident with cooking those legumes. It's going to take time. It's like if I went to decided to learn to become a mechanic. Yeah, it would be freaky at first. It would be time consuming in my head at first, but it gets easier as you go. So just finding where you can source your legumes may take time. Okay, that's okay. Step by step is what I want to leave you with. So let's just go through that. To cook whatever legume it is, soak it for a good amount of time, at least 24 hours, 36. Keep it warm if you can. If you see it fizzing the next morning, you're on a winning streak. You've got some great lacto-fermentation going on. Strain it and rinse that straining and rinse those beans well. Put them in a pot, cover them with a lot of liquid, cook them until they're ready. The younger they are as a dried bean, the more quickly they'll cook. They're ready, a lentil, anything, they're ready when soft pressure yields a lovely creamy centre. Store them in the fridge for up to 2 to 3 days in their cooking liquid, or put them in the freezer in a glass jar, but leave a good amount of headspace because the liquid will expand. And voila!
Voila! Looks delicious, Jude.
I'll just say, so that's just going to cook for about another 15 minutes and reduce down, and I'm just going to go through and mash it.
Looks great. One final question.
Yes.
Can you ever over soak your beans?
No.
I think you'll make that person very happy.
So look, I tell you when you know that your beans are over soaked. It's like it's possibly summer and the temperature is a lot warmer, and probably after 3 days they're grungy. Yeah, like your nose. Humans know when things are wrong because you kind of got a gag reflex as well. When they're slimy, yeah, that's a good sign. Slimy, grungy, chuck them into the compost.
Great.
Yeah.
Jude, thank you so much.
I love doing this. We've got to do more.
Yeah, really appreciate that. I'll share the links to your books. Also, there was that great workshop that you did for us, I think it was back in 2013 or 14, where we made muesli and we made granola and
we did too.
Crackers and
we
yogurt.
Did.
So we'll share those links as well.
That would be lovely. And I go into a lot more depth and a lot more time, and you get to see everything in the online classes as well.
Yeah. So please, everyone, have a look at Jude's website and her books. But
just remember, it's step by step. I think it's so important for people. You are all doing an amazing job. You're here, you're interested, you want to change the world. But sometimes changing that world requires skill, and you just learn it step by step. You're doing great.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. And you and I are going to have the beans, but these will be just as yummy if you've done them with a veggie stock, okay? So I've mashed them down a bit too. You can see I've reduced down the liquid, but I've mashed a lot of that lovely creamy bean to help do it. And you don't need a lot because these are just little. You could do bigger tortillas, or you could do these as nachos. Okay. Lettuce. I'm going to get a bit more of my curry.
This is what you've been storing in the fridge. How old was this, Jude?
2 weeks now.
In a damp tea towel?
Yep. And let's just chop that up a little bit because there's never too much coriander. Ever.
You're talking my language.
I love it. And it's coriander season, so it's like make coriander hay. There you go.